Hello and welcome to In Conversation with WLV Doctoral College. I'm Dr. Deborah Curitan and I'm the Research Development Manager at the University.
And I'm Dr. Ben Halligan, I'm Director of the Doctoral College.
We've been asked to do some vlogs about the various different chapters of the thesis. So we're going to start off with talking about the introduction chapter. So to me, the introduction chapter has a job to set up the research, to talk about the context, to talk about why it's important, to talk about why it's important that you do this piece of research. So Ben, what would you say the key components are of that chapter?
So it is a justification of what's to come in the way that you've just outlined it. But you're introducing the thesis that is to come, so I think of it as a bit like a restaurant menu, so that you'll see what will happen in chapter 1 and chapter 2, then in chapter 3 we return to this, then having made this argument we can move to chapter 4 where we will expand it in relation to some new example, So in a way it's a summation, a précis of all the work that is to come. So
there's a section of it that's going to be an overview of the thesis.
Yeah.
What else would be in there?
Before that, I think, in a way, often a thesis will begin with a question in the introduction. Why is it that? Or why have scholars not paid attention to? Or can it not be argued that? So typically it will raise a question or a series of questions, and then it will try and place the research that arises from those questions within a wider disciplinary context. You would see, therefore, that typically in a thesis, as part of the justification for what's going to come in the research that's going to happen, the researcher would also say that this has not been done before, so that the originality of what they're doing arises in part from the fact that this is the first time it's been done. And the fact it hasn't been done, there's perhaps a gap in the disciplinary field, and the thesis will therefore seek to fill this particular gap and create new knowledge and enhance the wider disciplinary field accordingly.
So we've got a context, a positioning of yourself, your work within that context, and some sort of question that kind of facilitates that discussion.
And then perhaps a bit of the overview, the précis of what's to come. I think as well, the other thing is that they tend to begin fairly gently.
Yeah.
Most theses won't just throw you into the deep end.
Yeah.
Why is it that bicarbonate of soda was never considered in relation to... But generally they will say perhaps something about the wider use of what they're researching, or the general field, or a series of misunderstandings. So they would tend to kind of comment on their perception of the disciplinary field. And to my mind, this can be quite interesting, where you have someone who's done a master's and then moves to a PhD, because within a master's final project, within a thesis, they've decided to look at a certain thing.
Yeah.
Then they've been surprised, maybe horrified, that this has not been looked at very thoroughly in their wider field. Yeah. And they're surprised because as a researcher, you see a library, you note how many journals there are, you think everybody must have now talked about everything, surely. But then you find that's not the case.
Yeah.
So you're frustrated, perhaps, and that's a very positive impulse in terms of being the motor to do a PhD. So often on the first page of the introduction, you get a sense of a frustration that the field has not looked at this particular area. Therefore, there's a need to. And the area holds out a promise of certain results that represent new knowledge. And therefore, let me tell you how the thesis is going to go about doing this.
A lot of the theses that I've examined and also that I've supervised will have a part of the introduction that might tell a little about the researcher and their journey and what came there. And I think some of this it kind of gets picked up on later when we go on to talk about ontology and epistemology and positionality. But there's something about why this piece of research is really important. So a bit of may start with a bit of a story around the researcher's journey itself. And in addition to what you have said, I think it's also important to have a justification in there for the way that you are going to approach the writing of the thesis. So that might be about whether you're going to write in the first or the third person. We know that's a bigger debate. We're not going to get into that. But if you are going to write in the first person, I always say that you need to justify that and tell your reader why you're doing that. If you're going to write in the third person, you should also justify why you're doing that. Also, if you're going to approach the thesis in an unconventional way, so perhaps you're not going to use the standard headings, or you're going to have 2 literature reviews because you're covering 2 different areas, that justification of why you're approaching the thesis and the way that you're doing it is really, really important.
That's very, very true. And I think the thing of positionality, even if you're not necessarily in agreement with bringing I in and talking about yourself, it may still be a smart thing to do in the introduction for a small paragraph, half a dozen sentences, because it's better to deal with it proactively yourself than have an examiner come back at you and say, why have you not identified who you are in terms of the field of research and how that might alter the way in which you analyse the findings. So even if you feel that it doesn't alter it, it would be smart to whack that into the introduction.
So the introduction, how long do you think it is? Or how long would you say introductions typically are in your field?
I would say within social sciences and within arts and humanities subjects, you wouldn't necessarily be wanting to go over 2,000 or 3,000 words unless you had some particular beef with your field's failures, or unless, and some people do this, you want to talk about kind of the popular perception. I mean, for example, a thesis on single mothers and elements of, I don't know, the economics of household management for single mothers might say that there's stuff to be found out because the perception of single mothers is quite wrong. So let me quickly give you a dozen examples of newspaper coverage, so that kind of thing may go in the introduction and expand it. But generally, 2,000-3,000 words seems about comfortable. What about you?
Psychology, education, health, well-being, probably about the same. And if I go back to my own PhD, where actually I took a very scientific approach in my research in those days. Gone to the dark side, as my PhD supervisor once told me. Again, the introduction to that was about 4 or 5 pages, so it was probably about 2,000, 3,000, 2,500 words.
I mean, in hard sciences, it can be quite straight to the point.
Yeah.
Here's an area that deserves further research. Here are 3 or 4 articles that note that this area deserves further research. The further research holds the promise of proving something or other, so that could just be a page or 2.
Yeah.
I tell you one thing that shouldn't be in the introduction, and maybe we should do a separate blog about this, which is a list of thank yous, acknowledgements, people who've helped. Because I think that ought really to go into the acknowledgements section. Well, we'll talk about that maybe some other time.
Okay. So the acknowledgement section is a separate section. Okay. So, in summary, it should be an introduction to the research, the researcher and the research, an introduction to the thesis, and an introduction to anything that you're doing differently and why.
Sorry.
And it shouldn't be too long.
And it shouldn't be too long.
Yeah.
I have one other bit of advice that was passed on to me by my late friend John Heaven, who said that there should be a blank page before the introduction.
Okay.
So you might have acknowledgements, you might have table of contents.
Yeah.
There might be some form saying that this is originality of work, or whatever your university needs.
Yeah.
And then you're into the introduction. But he said there should be a blank page there. And he said the reason for this is that it's like opening a box of chocolates and lifting off the paper that covers the chocolates. Yep. So if you do that, that will put the examiners in a state of mind that they're going to enjoy something akin to a box of chocolates. I don't know if that's true, but that's
Well,
quite good advice.
Quite like that. So thank you, Ben. So thank you for listening. And as always, if you like our vlogs, please do follow us. You can also press the notification button and be told when we release new vlogs. We release new vlogs every Friday, and so if you do press the notification button, you'll be told when the vlogs have been released. Also, if you've got any ideas for vlogs, some areas or topics that you would like us to cover, please put them into the comments section below. We love to hear your feedback, and we will cover the topics that you want us to talk about. So thanks for listening, and as always, we'll speak to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.